In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, Leif Thulin is going to share his thoughts on the Champions Classic. Of course, we're going to talk about Cooper Flagg and his big performance. And we're also going to talk about Khaman Maluach, Kon Knueppel, and a few other players that may have hurt or helped their draft stock. Stay tuned. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, along with my co-host, Leif Thulin, the man that watches more college basketball than anyone else. And I know last night was a date that had been marked on his calendar for quite a while. But before we get Leif's opinions on the Champions Classic, I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. I also want you to check out the Locked On newsletter. Your favorite team, whichever team you support, Locked On Lakers, Mavs, Jazz, Bulls, Blazers, as a newsletter from Locked On. So just go to lockedondaily.com to subscribe, and it's free. And you'll get a one-stop ultimate team and league-wide newsletter delivered to your inbox every morning from Locked On. So check it out at lockedondaily.com. And if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, I'm not sure what's taking so long, but please subscribe, like, share, comment, click the bell so you can be notified every time we drop an episode, because we are your source for NBA draft-related content. And speaking of the NBA draft, I know it is quite a few months away, but the projected number one pick in the 2025 NBA draft had its first big test last night, and I know Leif has a lot of thoughts on that. James and I had a podcast earlier just strictly dedicated to to Cooper Flagg.
I'll Leif, take that comparison.
Sorry, we're not doing a whole podcast dedicated to you, but I wanted to hear your thoughts on Cooper Flagg's performance.
He's special. Like, everyone's going to pile on about the last two possessions of the game, and in which he made mistakes. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But the fact of the matter is, I was at an NBA game in which there are multiple All-Stars on the floor last night, and I was watching Champions Classic at the same time. And I was mostly not even watching the NBA game, which is strange because I love the NBA. I'm at the game. And I watched a few plays that were mundane for Cooper Flagg, but only Cooper Flagg of the 9 other players on that floor and the 10 players on the NBA floor of the game I was at. The Jazz and Suns were playing. Devin Booker was out there. There was no Kevin Durant. So I want to preface this before I say it, because Kevin Durant could have made these plays. But Cooper Flagg made one-of-one plays of the game I was at. That was an NBA game that was scored a lot of points. He saw some all-stars on the floor, and of the game he was playing at Champions Classic. There was one sequence in which he grabbed a rebound where he was on the opposite block, and the ball bounced basically over the backboard to the other side, snatched it above everyone else, took it the length of the court, then slowed it down, called for a pick and roll, threaded the needle for Maluach to dunk it, and then on the other end blocked a shot. I watched the entire NBA game and didn't see anything near as impressive as that. You're going to hear people talk about, oh, he's not a refined scorer yet. No, he's not, but he scored 26 points and 12 rebounds in the first college game that actually had consequence and had athletes that were comparable to him. I think he was unbelievable, and he was asked to do too much because Duke shot so terribly that Kentucky was like, you know what? Caleb Foster's a 40% shooter. Let's dare shoot him. Tyrese Proctor, let's dare shoot him. Like, Duke shot so horribly that it made Cooper Flagg do things that were out of character. So much of the people that praise him say, hey, you know what? He doesn't force things. He's a great passer, plays within himself, makes the right basketball plays. That's always what you hear about him, along with the unbelievable attributes, the defense, the intensity. Well, he forced things, and honestly, the results were mostly good. You just saw the biggest stage, the pinnacle of that match. You saw a failure. He got stripped, and he slipped on the next one and lost the ball. But he's unbelievable.
I'm going to read a comment to you because James and I, like I mentioned, we did a podcast earlier this morning. This is a comment from one of our followers. I won't call his name out just because I don't need people to start trolling him. But he says Flagg was disappointing, far from an offensive initiator. He's like an elite small ball five, but how valuable can that role ever be? What are your thoughts on that comment?
See, I think the way he's been talked about entering this year can lead some people to believing that Duke was going to go undefeated, that he was infallible, as in he could not make a mistake. There's going to be mistakes made when you're 17 years old playing against a veteran team that's a top 15 team in the country in Kentucky. There's going to be mistakes made, but scoring 26 and 12 and playing outside of your comfort zone as the creator, like if there's a knock on Cooper Flagg, it's he's not an innate natural space creator, jump shot shooter. He's made himself into being good at those things already at the college level at 17 years old, even though that's not what he's innately good at. What he's innately good at is he's very big for the fluidity. He's got a huge frame for as fluid as he is. He's a great defender. He brings tremendous intensity, understands where to be, and then he's an elite athlete, not a sneaky athlete, an elite athlete. And I think he can play 3 through 5 at different stretches, not for a full game. I don't think he can play the 5. Like, I don't want that to be misunderstood as, oh, is he playing out of position? But I think he can play 3 through 5 for stretches on an NBA floor, especially as he matures, as he gets stronger. Well, in college, that allows him even more versatility. And sure, yeah, he's an initiator. And was his game more based and predicated on physicality in terms of scoring than skill? Yes, but the fact he was able to do that at 17 still means a lot to me. And I think the fact he scored 26 points and was fairly efficient in doing so, 9 to 19, is something I'm willing to hang my hat on. And I think his scoring is only going to develop. Like, he's a raw scorer right now that scored 26 points based on athleticism and desire. You get his shot a little bit better, which has improved vastly in the last year. You get his shot a little better. He gets a little stronger. He learns a few post moves, a few little, his handle's pretty good, actually. A few dribble moves to create ability to score from step backs or go to 3-point range off of his dribble moves. I think he's going to be a 20-point-a-game scorer in the NBA. And he may not be the best scorer in this draft class. It could be Ace Bailey, but he's the best player in this draft class because he can do that and all the intangible things he does offensively, along with his expert-level defensive ability.
Yeah, I don't think he's raw offensively. I don't think he's raw at all. He knows what he's doing, especially in the post. But I think it's a transition from being a big to a wing, because James and I mentioned that when he first burst up on the scene, he looked like an athletic play finisher. And I remember when I first saw him play, I thought oh man, this is a modern day Kenyon Martin, a guy that has good size, but not great size for the 4, but that can change the geometry of the floor with his defense, is athletic, is tougher than guys, and is going to finish everything around the rim strong with a dunk. Over time, he started to show more ball handling, show the ability to knock down shots. And now, I mean, that Kenyon Martin comparison is totally off, but he is developing. But I don't think he's raw. I mean, the times that I've seen him where he can't beat a guy off the dribble and he turns it into a post play, natural. The spin move on the baseline on Jackson Robinson,
beautiful,
natural. So to me, he has natural feel as a post player. And normally, in just watching a lot of players today, you don't see guys that are polished in the post and athletic. Usually, if you see a guy that's polished in the post, he's like a wide body, below the rim finisher that has had to use skill and head fakes and craftiness to make up for his lack of athleticism. I think Cooper combines both. That's why I think on the next level, he's going to be a guy that can exploit mismatches. If you put a big on him, he's going to take him off the dribble. If you try to guard him small, he's going to be able to take them to the post. And I know this is totally off subject, totally different players, but if you've noticed this year, NBA teams are guarding Victor Wembanyama small because he can't necessarily take advantage of some of those mismatches because he's not necessarily strong enough to post up the smaller guys. And then when he's forced to put the ball on the floor, that's what you want. but I think Cooper is going to be able to exploit mismatches all over the floor. And he's only 17, and he's only going to get better. So the sky is the limit for Cooper Flagg.
And in this game, they did that to Cooper. They put Otega Oweh on him at the end of the game and used his physicality that's been tested through 22 years of life. And Otega Oweh is a strong 6'5" guard, but he's physically more mature than Cooper Flagg. They did the same thing, in which they would want, when he was beating people off the dribble, he was beating Andrew Carr, he was beating Williams off the dribble, he was polished enough to score in the post against some of the other guards, against Kobe Brea, who's a strong 6'7".
He ran through Kobe Brea. There was one play where he was just like he shed him like he was a middle schooler.
Exactly. And so they ended up putting a guard on him. And I think that's the right thing to do against a guy like him, a guy like Chet, a guy like Wembanyama. I'm not saying exactly he's the same skill set, but in terms of how I'd play him, because he's such a dynamic athlete, just like those guys are at a level higher in Wemby and Chet, obviously being taller, the smaller player is going to cause him more trouble. But the fact he's able to most of the times get the better of that advantage, as well as drive past all those bigs that are adept. Like Amari Williams is an adept college basketball defender too. And I was really impressed with his ability to handle and find positive ways to attack different defenses seen in his first actual college basketball game. And I'm not saying that to disrespect his first two games, but the athletic levels were just so different, so vastly different in this game versus the two prior ones that I watched of him playing.
Yeah, I agree. Speaking of athletic levels, I want to hear your thoughts on Kon Knueppel. He seems like he struggled a little bit with the bump up in athleticism, especially in the second half. And also want to talk about Khaman Maluach, a good athlete who I thought really helped himself. But before we get into the second segment, let's talk about FanDuel, which is our sponsor for today and the #1 sports book. And right now, if you're a new customer, you can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. So you can get ready to bet on the NFL on the FanDuel Sportsbook app, and it gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, and it's all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you placed your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com and join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet, and that's only at FanDuel.com. All right, Khaman Maluach, a guy that I'm pretty high on. I have him at number 6 on my Big Board 1.0, and I've mentioned in multiple episodes, I don't think that he'll be a top 6 pick because of his production this year. It is what he can be in the future, and I know that's not like saying anything profound. You can say that with a lot of prospects, but I didn't think that statistically he'd have really good numbers. And so far, through 3 games, he's actually ahead of schedule from what I projected. And he's playing with a hurt wrist. I talked to someone close to him, and he has like a fracture in his hand, and it's something that's only going to be able to get better with rest. So he's going to have to play through it all season long. But Maluach made some good plays. They're not featuring him. He hasn't made a 3 yet, but as far as just like the hustle points, offensive rebounds, they're using him as a lob threat. And coming into the game, I wanted to see how he fared against Amari Williams. Amari Williams is older. He's probably 20 to 30 pounds heavier. He's the 3-time, I think, CAA Defensive Player of the Year, and he's physical. Khaman has struggled from time to time against physicality, and I thought Khaman won this matchup. What do you think?
Absolutely. I thought he was great. He hurt his knee a little bit when he got rolled up on and then started cramping. And I think that confluence of events that was unfortunate for Duke cost them the game. Not Cooper Flagg's turnover, not the fact that they went 4 of 23 from 3, but Khaman Maluach getting hurt. Because defensively, when he was in the game, Duke was stifling. Duke was stifling, and Cooper Flagg's going to draw a lot of attention because he's also unbelievable as a defender. But Khaman Maluach is a game changer. You cannot score at the rim when he's in the game unless it's in transition. So if they get back in the half court, aka not a turnover, or just get back on defense, because occasionally Kentucky would blister past them, and it was just lack of continuity getting back in communication. But Khaman Maluach blocked a bunch of shots. He stifles all rolls because you don't want to throw a lob. You don't want to attack the middle of the paint because he's able to step up and guard 2 at once. And offensively, I think this is an underrated thing. And I've thought this a lot about Rudy Gobert through the years. I think the same thing could be said about a guy like Derek Lively, who also went to Duke and funnily enough, kind of compares himself to Rudy Gobert and draws ire in that comparison because he says he's better, even though Gobert is on track to be a Hall of Famer. Gobert was very valuable for the Utah Jazz for years and years offensively because of his screening. He dives to the rim, and it opens up a ton of space for shooters. Duke got great shots when Khaman Maluach was in the game. He didn't necessarily have flashy plays. Like, yeah, he had an offensive rebound dunk. He had a couple dunks that were off of lobs. But they got wide open shots because Khaman Maluach dives, and he has so much respect as a vertical lob threat. They just missed the shot, so it looks different. But I think if he plays a few more minutes, and I think you shoot 6 of 23 instead of 4 of 23, they win this game by 10 because it was just when they missed them, it led to lack of confidence. But Maluach, I think, was perhaps the most indispensable player in this game for Duke in those stretches. He made it possible for them to be as good as they were defensively, not Flagg, though Flagg is sensational defensively.
Yeah, he only played 23 minutes. I don't know what is going on with Duke when it comes to cramping, but Flagg had to leave the first 2 games early because of cramping, and Khaman was limited to just 23 minutes because he dealt with cramps. All right, I want to hear your thoughts on Kon Knueppel. He really struggled, was 5 of 20 from the floor. I think he went the last 16 minutes without a bucket. I felt like the step up and athleticism had an impact on that. Do you agree, or do you just think he had an off shooting night?
A mix of both. I think Kon Knueppel probably won't shoot that poorly for the rest of the season, especially from 3. I think he forced a couple as well, though. I think the length and athleticism forced him to shoot prior to when he was set or prior to when he was ready to launch the ball, but he knew he needed to score because he saw his other backcourts mates struggling. You saw Caleb Foster brick the ball. Like, he was way off. Tyrese Proctor forced it. Flagg was forcing it. I think he took it upon himself. It was incumbent upon himself to try to score. You saw him make 2 left-hand layups, and you saw, he's strong. He went after the ball. I thought he moved his feet very nicely. So does my stock change on him? Not particularly. I think he's still a great shooter. I think he's a better athlete than many people would have thought before the season, but I don't think athletically he's someone who stands out in that sort of game in the way that Flagg does or Maluach does, obviously. I've got a fun fact for you, though. Kentucky shot 10 of 25 from 3. Kansas made 5 of 17. Duke went 4 of 23. Michigan State shot 3 of 24. Kentucky practiced with the Spalding ball a week. My hunch is that the other teams did not, because they could not toss a ball. They couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, hit water from an ocean, that type of thing. I wonder if it was something about the ball. And I know that sounds silly, but there are a lot of bad misses that weren't particularly close. And I wonder if he gets back to the comfort zone, the Nike ball that Duke uses, he's going to shoot above 50%, along with just regression to the mean. But I'm not worried about Kon Knueppel.
Okay, yeah, the ball does make a difference. I remember I was in Miami a couple years ago when the NBA switched from the Spalding to the Wilson, and they gave everybody new basketballs. And guys were complaining about the ball and the struggle. But then I remember the old basketball, you had to break it in. Like, if it was brand spanking new, it was. If you can shoot, you can shoot, but there was an adjustment to it. All right, when we return, I want to talk about a few other players that played in the Champions Classic. It wasn't all Duke, even though I feel like from an NBA draft perspective, the Duke players are going to be the highest players on the board. And even a guy like Isaiah Evans, who didn't play, is probably a projected higher NBA draft pick than some of the guys on other teams. But at one point, I felt like Duke is struggling. They can't make a 3. Are they going to give Isaiah Evans, a guy that is instant offense, an opportunity to come jumpstart the offense? And it didn't happen. And he just hasn't played a lot of minutes. And I know it's got to be tough for him, but, I don't know if they're going to find a role for him. We talked about this on the episode, I don't know, maybe like 2 months ago. But do you see a way that he can get in the rotation?
Not without an injury. I think that's what I said last time we talked about it as well. I just didn't see much of a opportunity for him, especially with the development of Kon Knueppel. And now we see how real he is. He shot 20 times, even on a bad night. The one that surprised me, though, is I thought Mason Gillis would get more minutes, particularly because Maluach was hurting. And you are going to see shooting, and he could bring that. So if Mason Gillis doesn't get the minutes and he's already entrenched in the rotation, I don't see a way for the Darren Harrises, the Isaiah Evanses, who are highly regarded and very talented shot makers and shooters, to get those minutes in that high of stakes. I think Shire, I would say I'd criticize that, honestly, that the fact that it's already an 8-man rotation. I think 8-man rotations are great come March Madness, but that's the third game of the season. I don't think you want to bury the confidence of a guy like Isaiah Evans, who could be critical, a guy like Darren Harris, who could play an important role in some games as a really good shooter. So to answer your question, I think Isaiah Evans is likely coming back for a second year or transferring, which is what I said a while ago. I think he's going to transfer and be a highly coveted transfer, someone who's going to score the rock efficiently, prolifically in another role, and hopefully efficiently for his draft stock in a different school, probably, because Duke has too much talent coming in next year.
Yeah, if this was football, he would definitely, I would recommend him take that redshirt year. Do not let this count against your eligibility. All right, when we return, we're going to talk about Otega Oweh. All right, let's talk about our new sponsor, which is Mint Mobile. And with a lot of the big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. It's somewhere between the store and in the first month's bill, you find out that your price magically skyrocketed. And with Mint Mobile, you never have to worry about ever getting got again, because when Mint Mobile says it's $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they actually mean it. So you can say goodbye to overpriced wireless plans and jaw-dropping monthly bills and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at just $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data, unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. So ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal. You can get 3 months of premium wireless service for just $15 a month. So to get this offer with your new 3-month premium wireless plan, just go to mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. You can cut your wireless bill to $15 a month, but you got to go to mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. Now, it will require a $45 a month upfront payment, which is the equivalent of $15 a month, and it is for new customers on their first 3-month plan only. Speeds are slower above 40 gigabytes on an unlimited plan, and additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. But check out Mint Mobile. All right, last segment, Otega Oweh. I thought he really helped himself. He is a player that I know there was one team in particular, and I mentioned this on a previous podcast, that told me they actually hoped he entered the draft last year because they were going to snatch him up on the two-way, just because they felt like he was a player that they believed that even last year, while he was at OU, was a guy that can come in and defend on an NBA level due to his athleticism. The comparison they gave me was Luguentz Dort. They mentioned that right now he thinks he's an offensive player, but when he gets to the NBA, if he can have the same mindset as Lou Dort, who signed like an $80 million contract recently, he could have a similar role. So this particular scout representing a team, I don't know if his thoughts represent the entire team or the front offices, but this scout felt like he was a player that could come in and help a playoff team with his defense. So they were kind of upset that he came back to school, because they thought, like, if he comes back to school, he's probably going to put himself in a position where we won't be able to get him on like a two-way. What were your thoughts on his overall performance? And he shot 37% from 3 last year at OU, but it was on a small sample size. This year, I think he's at like 50% or something like that. I know that's not sustainable, but do you buy into the shooting improvement?
No, I don't think he's a shooter. Okay. His shot's ugly. He takes forever to get it off, and the reason he gets it off is because people want him to. But you told me that about Lou Dort and how that this one team had wanted him to stay in the draft after being at Oklahoma, where he played alongside Milos Uzan. He played alongside Javier McCollum, and he was playing off the ball, and he was playing more of that, hey, I'm the 3 out here defensively, but I'm guarding 1 through 4, and I'm a nightmare but offensively, my game's incomplete. At Kentucky, he gets to showcase that defensive side, and it's more heralded because he's going to be so open, and because they have a prolific offense that's very well spaced. He can get out and run because they play quickly. They have a lot of back cuts that are orchestrated through an inverted offense where they have a big, like Andrew Carr, who can pass the ball, like Amari Williams, who's a very good passer, and he's able to cut and showcase that athleticism. And then last night might have been the biggest night of his life, Otega Oweh. And it doesn't have anything to do with points he scored. It has to do with those 2 possessions against Cooper Flagg at the end of the game. He's the reason Kentucky won this game, because they switched him onto Cooper Flagg, and his physical strength against Cooper Flagg's length was able to influence the game and sway it in favor of Kentucky. Not to mention he made a couple shots. Not to mention he made the intangible play of getting that rebound at the end of the game that sealed the deal. I think he's going to get drafted because of this game and many other that Kentucky will have, because they're going to be highlighted and showcased as a top 20 team wearing Kentucky. It's not the same doing it at Kentucky versus Oklahoma. This helps him tremendously. So I do think your informant regarding Otega Oweh is correct, that I don't think he's going to have a chance to get him as a 2-way. I think he's going to be drafted in the 2nd round because of that pathway of being a defensive pest who has upside as an okay shooter. Yeah, he's not shooting 50%, but Lou Dort has had playoff games where he scored 30 points because the other team dares him to. These guys are all good basketball players. They're just not great shooters in comparison to other professional basketball players. That's why they're left open, but you can still make them pay and make your threes.
Yeah, he had a well-rounded night, 15 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, a block, made 2 of 3 from deep. And I do think that on the NBA level, he is always going to be considered, as you would call, the dare shooter. And so if he can just knock down open shots, defend, hustle, make the intangible plays, fill the lanes in transition, I think that is a pathway to a long career. I was just talking to a scout at the Mavs game on last Friday, and we talked a lot about VJ Edgecombe, but he mentioned the Pacers, for example. He doesn't work for the Pacers, but he mentioned the Pacers. He's like, they need a wing that wants to play defense. And he talked about Mathurin. He talked about Mathurin is great on offense, but they may not trust him on defense. He said that's why Ben Shepherd is playing. And so he mentioned teams like that, playoff teams that have aspirations of making a deep run in the playoffs. They just need that guy that can defend multiple positions, that is a good athlete that you can say, hey, guard Jason Tatum for a few minutes. Guard Jaylen Brown for a few minutes. Can you guard Gilgeous-Alexander? Can you guard Luka? And Otega Oweh has a skill set that teams find valuable. But unfortunately for the scout that I spoke with last year, he probably won't be available on a 2-way deal because he's probably going to get drafted. All right, let's switch over to Kansas, Michigan State. Wasn't the most exciting game. The crowd definitely didn't think so. If you looked at the crowd, it was empty. Considering that these are 2 blue blood schools, it was like the city of Atlanta was like, this is the undercard. We are just ready for the main event. And who's the best player on Kansas, in your opinion, as far as like an NBA prospect?
Flory Bidunga, probably. I will put a pause on the sense of I don't know if he's big enough to play center, but he is a center. So he needs to round out his game, also get stronger, but he's got the upside. The guy that I like on Kansas a lot, though, is Zeke Mayo. He had a bad shooting game. And if you watched it, you're like, man, like I thought he was a scorer. Last game, he scored 21. He was the Summit League Player of the Year. But you look at a bad game and he still gets you double-digit rebounds and 7 or 8 assists, and he impacts the game. At the end of the game, he's trusted with the ball in his hands, and that meant a lot. I was thrilled to see him in the starting lineup over Diggy Coit. No offense to Diggy Coit, but that makes the team significantly better. And I think Kansas is the best team in the country once they round out the role definition of who does what. Because DeJuan Harris is going to get you a good shot. Bill Self's going to coach you well. Hunter Dickinson's going to score. And Zeke Mayo is an NBA player that not everyone knows about. And he's an NBA guard supplementing the core of Kansas that's been there for 3 years regarding Harris, Adams, and Dickinson. And so you had him and Flory Bidunga, the two best prospects on the team. I'm pretty happy about their chances. And the more that Kansas is nationally watched, I think more and more people are going to appreciate the game of Zeke Mayo. As for Flory Bidunga and why I think he's the best prospect is the guy has an unbelievable motor, jumps out of the gym, and is able to rebound at a very high level for someone who's as slender as he is. Yes, he'll need to develop a little more offensive skill, but I like his motor. I like his coordination for someone who's so slender and bouncy. You don't necessarily see coordinations. I think those two guys are going to be crucial to leading what I think is the best team in the country right now.
Yeah, I'm a big Zeke Mayo fan. I talked about him 2 years ago. I like the passing. I think that if you watch him for the first time as a Kansas fan or just watching Kansas and you saw him score 20 points in those first two games, you may bill him as a scorer. But when I saw him at South Dakota State, I was most impressed with his passing and his playmaking. There's some people that I know that didn't like him because they felt like he wasn't a dynamic enough scorer or dynamic enough playmaker to be an NBA prospect. But I think Zeke Mayo is going to be a guy that once he leaves Kansas, because right now in Kansas, you're playing in somewhat of an equal opportunity offense. I think Zeke Mayo is going to be the type of player that really surprises teams during workouts and at summer league. He's surprised me a little bit, scoring 20 points in his first two games, coming off the bench. But one of the things I like and appreciate most about him is that it's not all about scoring. And he showed that last night, big stage, shot was off, was 2 of 8 from the floor, but he still found ways to impact the game, whether it was on the offensive glass or just on the glass period or with his playmaking. All right, wrapping up, Hunter Dickinson had a monster game. I know you're not the biggest Hunter Dickinson fan as far as being an NBA prospect because of his defense, but he had a monster performance, 13 of 21 from the floor, 28 points, 12 rebounds. Kansas pretty much struggled to put the ball in the basket outside of him. Do you think that he can turn heads with his play this season?
No, because he's a known commodity. Like Hunter Dickinson is a guy who's been an All-American caliber player for the past 4 years, so I don't think he's going to change anyone's perception of him this year. He could be a first-team All-American, perhaps even the player of the year. I don't think he will because I don't think he's good enough defensively to be that well-rounded, but that's an aside. I think he's going to score 20 and 10, and he's going to get great looks all the time because of the respectable shooting that they've added this year after last year's debacle of having no one who could shoot the ball during one maybe 10-day spurt of Johnny Furphy shooting the ball well. And you look at it, and he's going to have no double teams to deal with. He's going to score left-hand jump hooks. He's super skilled. Like when you talked about skillful post players, I thought of him. I thought of Jackson Kohler, the guys who are not jumpers, who are slow-footed. And that's their issue. They can't jump. They can't defend the rim, but they're skillful offensively. But today's day and age, you don't want isolation in the post in the NBA. So Hunter Dickinson at 24 years old in about 20 days is not going to be a draft pick.
Hunter Dickinson is going to be on somebody's summer league team, and he's either going to look terrible or he's going to be a player that makes the team or gets a two-way, goes to the G League, puts up big numbers, and then he's stuck in no man's land. That is my prediction for Hunter Dickinson. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day. And if it's not your first listen of the day, to check out the earlier episode where James and I, my brother James and I, we did a podcast on Cooper Flagg. And also, I want to let you know, or remind you about the Locked On newsletter. Your favorite podcast now has a newsletter. I want to introduce you to the Locked On, fill in the blank, whoever your favorite team is, daily newsletter. It is one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. So sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com. Start your day with the all-new and free Locked On newsletter covering your favorite team. Once again, it's Rafael, Barlowe, and Leif, Thulin, and we are out of here.